Good afternoon, morning, evening, wherever you are in the world. It's been a while since I've done one of these types of videos. I'm calling it a quest of sorts. I'm currently in the city of Chester, which is in Cheshire, the county of Cheshire, the United Kingdom. If you don't know the geography of the United Kingdom, it's pretty much the northwest of the UK, probably about half an hour away from Liverpool and Manchester, and just on the border between England and Wales. And it's very famous for being a walled city. There's a lot of Roman architecture here. There's a lot of heritage in terms of like Tudor buildings, Victorian buildings. And it's also where I was born in 1980, and I spent many years here until I was about 18, 19, and I literally could not wait to leave. Through various circumstances, I've been brought back to the city, and I've probably been back here for about a year and a half roughly now. But because obviously my mind is now full of like mad theories about the world, I'm looking at everything in a very different light. I've been looking at Chester in a very curious way. And then today, what I'm describing is the Minerva line. It's an alignment that I found linking up Eaton Hall, which is owned by the Duke of Westminster, and also links to St Mary Without Walls, a church, and then also intersects with the goddess Minerva statue, which is a sacred site here that was originally popularised by the Romans, but I have indications maybe something was there a lot longer than that. And then Chester Cathedral, Mostyn Hall, St Oswald's Church, and then Backford Hall. And maybe there's nothing to it, but since returning here, because I feel energy a lot more than I ever used to. And when I was at the Minerva statue, and it was literally the first time I've ever been there, even though I'd lived here like 20 years beforehand. But the potent energy when I was at that place, I could just feel it in my legs. And I was like, whoa, it was a real surprise. And then just reacquainting myself with, the city of Chester, and there was a new cinema that was built in the centre. And I remember sitting there, and I've watched various films there. And I was just feeling all this energy. And it just really took me by surprise. And I never kind of thought of Chester's being an energetic place. This is why I'm sort of really going to investigate this alignment. There could be nothing to it. There is what is called a Roman road that kind of goes alongside this alignment, so that could also kind of factor in. But it's just the energy and just the alignment when I was looking on the map, and obviously the Duke of Westminster is a seriously wealthy individual. I'm going to be deep diving into him a little bit more. But yeah, it's just a big question about sometimes, these moneyed elites or elite families, do they know more about the placement of their, where they live, and how they're harnessing some of these energies for their own personal gain, their own personal wealth. So that kind of comes into the question. And particularly Mostyn Hall is part of Dale Barracks, which is it's part of the Chester Regiment. So it's an army base now and has been for a while. I think it is going to be mothballed in the next 10 years. But again, you find a lot of places in the United Kingdom, in fact all over the world, when you have these energetic places, there tends to be a military presence. And then on this channel, my podcast and various videos, I've been to Rendlesham. There's lots of army bases around there, and there's obviously the famous Rendlesham incident that occurred there with the UFOs, but also Wiltshire, big fan of Avebury, loads of military bases around there, Salisbury Plain, etc. So when you have like energetic places, there's always like a military presence. And again, it all could be a big nothing burger, but I think I've never found anything on the internet or any other researcher or author who's kind of written, I could be wrong, but I've never written about this alignment. So I think it's interesting. So today, that's what I'm going to be investigating on this quest. A criticism people might have is the fact is like, well, you're always going to find alignments, particularly in the United Kingdom, because there's so many old buildings around. But if you look on a map, it's quite unique. I mean, there's literally 7 quite significant megaliths or places of architecture, all in a line. And I think that's quite a significant thing. And then what really seals the deal for me is just the feeling of energy that I felt, the experience that I've had being particularly the Minerva statue and in Chester city centre. And I know people always really just go back to the Romans as being, but I have questions about, what was there before. A lot of these times, like churches, are built on existing sacred sites that predate that. So the big question I have is really what was there in the city of Chester before the Romans. And just to make everything even more crazy, there's an author, Ralph Ellis, who's written a series of books to do with the origins of Jesus, the Holy Grail, and also links to King Arthur. And he's had some really interesting research, it's a bit out there, where he's claiming potentially Jesus was actually held by the Romans as a prisoner in Chester city centre. So he's drawing parallels to the fact that Jesus may have visited Chester and been incarcerated here, and also links to the Holy Grail. So there's a lot to contend with today.
In 2024, whilst browsing a UK Ordnance Survey map of Chester and surrounding areas, I quite quickly realised there appeared to be an alignment of Eaton Hall, part of the Duke of Westminster estate, along with St Mary's Church outside the walls, the goddess Minerva statue, Chester Cathedral, Moston Hall, which is now part of the Dale Military Barracks, St Oswald's Church, Backford, and finally Backford Hall. Similar to other alignments or energetic lines, could there be further correlations and linkages north into Scotland and maybe beyond? Further north at present needs more investigation, but drawing a line south did bring more alignments come into focus, with Shrewsbury, again a very old ancient city with its own cathedral. Continuing on, the line then intersects with Bath. This city is very similar to Chester, with a very large looming Roman presence and extensive geothermally heated baths. These natural bathing facilities were harnessed, designed and constructed by the Romans, and is still a hugely prominent feature of the town to this day. Chester and Bath were strategic bases for the Roman Empire, and waters feature very heavily in both communities. The River Dee snakes its way across the landscape, forming in the mountains of Wales and then out into Liverpool Bay, and then finally to the Irish Sea. The Dee was perceived as sacred not only by the Romans but also other ancient cultures that predate the Romans. Chester's Roman name is Diva, which is also the name of the river water goddess, a name probably also borrowed from the pre-Roman civilization known as the Cornovi tribe. Local folklore also hints that this powerful river goddess was earlier known as Aerfen. According to some sources, 3 human lives were required a year as a sacrifice to totally ensure success on the battlefield. This bloodthirsty ritual may have been continued on with the Romans. But to counter this argument through my current reading, there has been a very considered ancient policy of demonising the practices of Celtic or pre-Celtic tribes as rampantly sacrificing people as a mechanism to demonise their knowledge and way of life. To me, this river goddess reverence could also tie into and influence the Minerva goddess statue, another powerful feminine deity later revered by various Roman religious cults. So is it possible that maybe these pre-Celtic tribes knew this sacred site by a different name, such as Aerfen?
I'm at St Mary's Without the Walls Church, which is literally behind the Minerva goddess statue. It's now started to rain, hence hood. But it's got a very weird name, St Mary's Without the Wall. And I was like, I didn't know what that meant. And specifically, the original church for St Mary's was St Mary's upon a hill, which was within the walls of Chester. And then it was moved and rebuilt, interestingly, by the first Duke of Westminster in 1885. And now this is why it's called St Mary's Without the Walls, because it's outside of Chester walls itself. So yeah, bit of history I didn't know.
St Mary's outside the walls, as you just heard, was constructed to replace St Mary's on the hill and funded by the first Duke of Westminster, and went on to be completed in 1887. The building stands directly behind the Minerva goddess statue on a sandstone outcrop, the same sandstone the goddess also sits on. The church is a prominent example of a Victorian Anglican church and is still in active use, and serves the surrounding community of Hanbridge. Its large protruding spire renders it visible from many areas of Chester.
The Minerva goddess statue is behind me. This is I'm currently located in Edgarsfield, I think it's called, which originally used to be owned by the Duke of Westminster, and he gifted it to the community. And it's a place as a child and a teenager. I never came here before, and it was only really as an adult for the first time I just started to feel all this energy running up my legs. I was like, whoa, this place is quite energetic. I think this is probably like the 5th or 6th time of me coming here. And I'm not feeling that now. I'm feeling a lot of heart-centered love, and I was getting that feeling actually near St Mary's Church, which again is behind me at the moment. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of potent energy here. And I know that the Romans popularised this place. Obviously they've named it, and there's a lot of reasons why I've read for its existence. Some were saying it was something to do with like the Romans who were excavating. They were like claiming this is a quarry. Obviously it's that big bit of sandstone that kind of sticks out with the statue carved in the side, and it was there for protection for all the workers in the quarry. But I've heard other things, like obviously there's a Roman road that goes right next to this park. It goes over the river into the city centre itself through the walls, and the weary travellers would come here to bless themselves. But I have a lot of theories and questions, because I think this really does predate the Romans, and I think it probably was a sacred site by whatever civilization was here beforehand, just due to the energies. So the Romans kind of gave it reverence and gave it a name. I've no idea if these other civilizations had it as a deity or just maybe had a megalith and they were harnessing the energy for healing potentially or sacred purposes. I have no idea, but definitely here now I'm feeling that energy. It's a very potent place.
The Minerva Shrine statue is located in the Hanbridge area of Chester, overlooking the River Dee. Interestingly, it's one of the only surviving rock-cut shrines still standing in Western Europe. According to mainstream sources, the statue was likely carved in the 2nd century AD by local Roman quarry workers who excavated the stone used by the empire for its fortifications and architecture. Although the shrine is incredibly worn and weathered, it's thought to show the goddess Minerva holding a spear in her right hand, a shield in her left, and an owl perched on her shoulder, thought to represent wisdom. People say the fact that the statue remains is remarkable, for once the Christian faith took hold over Western Europe, many of the previous idols and deities of the past were either defaced or destroyed. People speculate the statue may have remained untouched due to people mistaking it for Mother Mary. In esoteric traditions of Roman culture, Minerva was depicted as a goddess of war, wisdom and craftsmanship. She was revered by her followers due to her connection to Prometheus. Minerva provided assistance in stealing fire, symbolic of sacred hidden knowledge from the gods, and bestowing it to humanity, allowing humanity to rise from a primitive animalistic species to wielding godlike powers and understanding. Edgar's Field around the statue overlooking the river acts as a natural amphitheatre for ritual activities. It's important to note that although quarries or earthworks were used to source sacred stones for use in megaliths and other aspects of sacred architecture, the quarries themselves would have spiritual significance and provide a space for ritual and esoteric practices. Edgar's Cave is a small enlarged opening to the right of the carved statue, which may have been enlarged later on and also used for ritualistic purposes and simple offerings. I would argue like a broken record, how far back does this site really go? The Romans were constantly taking over pre-existing sacred sites and either absorbing or co-opting them into their own spiritual or religious practices. The straight road network found across the UK is always attributed to the Romans, but many have said that the Romans were merely using and maintaining existing infrastructure. The main Roman road in Chester runs right alongside the Minerva goddess and straight through the centre of Chester and out further north, passing all the nodal points I'm discussing in this exploration. Minerva, as we'll learn later, is also linked to the secret mystery cult of Mithras, which potentially still has converts in various wealthy circles to this very day. This last year I've been heavily influenced by Michael Tazarian's worldview and his Irish Origins of Civilization books. His main thesis is that there is more to Ireland and the United Kingdom than we realise. He highlights that the Romans and then preceding church power structures were very adept at destroying spiritual, cultural and historical information concerning what had come before. So the majority of the accepted history concerning the overly generalised term of Celts is overly simplistic and purposefully sanitised and maybe even inverted. Big questions such as why did the Romans with all the might and power fail to take places like Wales and Ireland? Is this because maybe they were initially coming up against a civilization that was actually more advanced in many areas? In his writings, Tazarian explores ideas that Ireland particularly was the centre of spiritual, technological and cultural progress, influenced from previous ancient lost civilizations. It was the keeper of deep beneficial knowledge for the broader spiritual collective and human spirit. He makes direct links to the Phoenicians who settled all over the world and brought advanced understanding and technologies. They were the ancient practitioners of Druidism, master healers, astrologers, diviners and deeply spiritual, venerated around the globe for their knowledge. One of the main evidence points Tazarian considers is the etymology of words and how they form and move across cultures, making it very challenging to manipulate the truth, because it's hidden in the conveyance of language. As an example, the ancient Vedic Aryans of northern India referred to the British Isles, including Ireland, as Brit Shatan, a Sanskrit word meaning seat of religion or blessed land. This maybe provides a hidden insight into how these lands were viewed globally by other advanced cultures. The Isle of Anglesey, roughly 2 hours drive to the west of Chester, overlooking the Irish Sea, is a well-known final bastion and cultural stronghold of Druidism and its spiritual and cultural teachings. The Romans and later Church are well documented in burning, destroying and killing the keepers of this sacred knowledge, so the historical lens of these ancient cultures could wholly be completely misunderstood. It's stated that the Romans built Diva Victrix around 79 AD. The Cornovi and maybe earlier Disiangli tribes were likely to have been deeply rooted in Druidism and its teachings. The natural environment of rivers, hills and the overall land had deep energetic, astrological and spiritual significance. Yes, there is a practical aspect of having a settlement next to rivers and a strategic positioning on hills, but there very well could be astrological, electromagnetic and earth energies at play in Chester city centre, which were being harnessed by these tribes and later Romans and then finally the church. Personally, I felt these telluric currents very viscerally multiple times in Chester. To me, it's significant that other major settlements such as Shrewsbury and Bath all seem to be in alignment, and there could be much more fidelity to this alignment further north and south respectively. Of course, the big question, is there an underlying energetic component to these connections, and can we speculate that maybe actually there is a deep energetic understanding and unfortunate manipulation by members of Masonic orders or other secretive organisations. The very much tame River Dee, due to the installation of the weir next to the Minerva statue, has stabilised the flow, but also inadvertently drained areas of land, reclaiming it from the water. To these ancient Druidic tribes, the River Dee was a powerful goddess. It is widely thought that the Celtic goddess Aerfen very much represented and embodied the powerful flow and motion of the Dee. She was the representation, the arbiter of fate, warfare, and the battlefield. Originally, after discovering the alignment, I considered naming it Minerva, but I feel it right to maybe roll it back even further and use Aerfen. So the Aerfen line. This seemed to be the earliest sacred name of the waters of the River Dee. Author Ralph Ellis, an independent researcher and author, has written an anthology of books detailing his quest and gradual understanding on the core roots and origins of the Jesus story and how it intertwines and influences the legends of King Arthur. Very much a rebel of the mainstream historical and archaeological thinking, his process involves going back to ancient texts, sacred sites, and artifacts. His research has taken him all over the world, so his work is very much grounded and rooted in materiality. His connections linking Jesus, the Holy Grail, King Arthur, and Chester has been full of incredible personal synchronicities for me. Arthurian legends have also sharply come into focus for me after trying to find a meaningful thread of connection to these lands of Britain. A connection and culture that isn't a manipulated manifestation by established pervasive powers. Ellis's central theory is that Jesus is a composition of different characters throughout the ages, but one of the main individuals influencing the Jesus mystery was the sixth king, Isas Manu of Edessa, a powerful monarch in northern Syria. This king was instrumental in leading the Jewish revolt against Rome between 66 and 70 AD. Three main points of evidence to support Ellis's claim include a bronze coin depicting King Manu wearing a crown of thorns, similar to Jesus and his crucifixion crown. The Jewish revolt period matches better alongside the Jesus narrative, rather than a traditional timeline of events. Ellis argues that Jesus was not a pauper prince of peace, but actually relatively wealthy, and a king who fought Rome, a warrior rebel. So how does Chester connect to this biblical drama? Well, after the failed Jewish revolt, the Roman authorities captured many of the rebels, including Jesus. Rather than execute the warrior king and his close followers, Rome decided to exile them, a common practice by the Imperium for some of the most dangerous and publicly sensitive individuals. According to Ellis, Jesus was maybe exiled to the furthest reaches of the Roman Empire and the furthest away as possible from his power base, so very likely this was the fortress of Diva. Interestingly, Diva Victrix, considering its location, was unusually large, and so my thoughts do wonder to what were they protecting, or in this case, incarcerating. Even now, military encampments all over the world are linked to energetic sacred areas of land, and in this instance, when coupled with potential high security prisoners, I can see potentially why the Chester site is so unusually large. Within the walls of modern day Chester, where the old shopping centre and market known as the Forum currently stands, situated opposite Chester Cathedral, and to the side of the Chester Town Hall, the Forum building now lies abandoned. Back in ancient Rome and Diva, this site was the very location for a very strange shaped elliptical building. Ellis claims this elliptical building was connected to Jesus and his followers and served them as an astrological temple a temple of the zodiac based on the Jewish zodiac of Hamat Teverah of the Sea of Galilee. So the structure wasn't really a Christian church, but more dedicated to spiritual gnosis of a more cosmic and astrological nature. If this was the case, it means that Jesus and his disciples were given a certain amount of high status privileges, rather than die on a cross. Ellis's research points towards Jesus living the rest of his life in Chester and eventually dying in 101 AD. So how does King Arthur link to these biblical accounts? Again, it is Ellis's opinion that the local remaining Celtic population referred to Jesus as Arthur T, which literally means the Egyptian. Arthur T eventually, over the ages, then merged into Arthur. So King Arthur and his knights were actually Jesus and his 12 disciples. Later on, the Knights Templars, according to Ellis, during the First Crusades and after the liberation of Edessa in Syria, learnt of the true history of Jesus and the Jewish revolt timeline. So the Templars, in order to protect the true history and knowledge, decided to use coded language and narratives to protect the legends and the real history of Jesus by crafting the Arthurian legends. This is very interesting because from many areas of Chester, particularly the centre, which is essentially on top of a hill, looking out to the west, the Welsh hills are a constant presence in the background. Last year, I started to walk those hills out of curiosity. Apart from finding them to be deeply energetic and uncovering gripping stories of the Berwyn UFO in 1974 and potentially military interactions with ET craft, there are names within the fabric of the land and hills such as World's End and Craig Arthur. World's End depicting the final battle and King Arthur's mortal injury where he is taken to the mystical land of Avalon. This battle marks the final nail in the coffin for the rest of Camelot and King Arthur's peaceful reign. A really curious, powerful connection concerning the Welsh goddess, Aerfen, is the Irish equivalent or counterpart, goddess Morrigan, who is also portrayed as a war deity who influenced battle outcomes, with links to sovereignty and prophecy. Morrigan is acquainted to be Morgan Le Fay by some scholars, King Arthur's half-sister, a powerful sorceress with the ability to influence fate and heal warriors, and sometimes through shape-shifting abilities even appear on the battlefield. These narrative weaves can connect to ideas of Lady of the Lake, which interestingly comes back full circle to sacred waters and maybe, tenuously, the River Dee. Some of the first written Latin texts attributed to Arthurian accounts were compiled by a Welsh monk or cleric in 829 AD. He proposed Arthur fought 12 battles in the British Isles, one of them, the 9th, playing out in the City of Legions. Later, a prominent archaeologist, Osbert Guy Stanhope, proposed in 1935 that the City of Legions was actually Chester and its Roman fortress, the location of Arthur's 9th battle. But of course, this idea is widely disputed by modern-day mainstream historical thinkers and scholars. Chester Cathedral and its history spans thousands of years, again like most cathedrals or churches. It was an earlier sacred place for the Romans and also pre-Roman Celtic tribes before the onset of Christendom. Similar to many other medieval churches and cathedrals of the time, the cathedral is positioned east to west, symbolising Christ the Son as the light of the world, rising in the east and setting in the west, aligning the most sacred area, the altar, to the rising morning sun. Again, how much of the astronomical alignment and alchemical encoding are echoes of earlier sun worship practices. There is a complex overall geometry at work within its architecture, following various tenets of sacred geometry and the golden section. The cathedral's main present construction occurred at the height of the Templar Knight era and medieval esotericism. This understanding and knowledge base has been lost in the sands of time, or directly and conveniently forgotten. The medieval misericords, which tend to be wooden carvings found underneath folding seats, are ripe with esoteric symbolism and alchemical and occult references. These symbols go far deeper than the traditional Church of England's current teachings. A big part of Chester's cultural offerings to the community, both local and national, are the annual regular mystery plays, which are now very much focused around the cathedral as a venue. Originally, they played out on wagons which would move around the city. The Chester Mystery Plays are a series of 25 medieval plays or cycles retelling biblical stories from both the New and Old Testament. This is fascinating not only due to Ralph Ellis's research into Jesus and his incarceration in Roman Chester, but also due to the play's links to trading guilds and the Freemasons. I have found information alluding to the fact that these mystery plays may have been inspired by other events that predate these medieval plays. So again, how far back do these plays and traditions go?
So, this is the second part of my journey, the Odyssey along the Minerva line. I've entered my trusty steed, the old Vauxhall Corsa. I'm firstly going to go over to the Duke of Westminster estate, and you'll be able to see how beautiful the area is. It's probably one of my most favourite areas to kind of walk around. You can park up in a village called Eccleston and walk along the River Dee. So River Dee turns into an estuary and then goes out to the sea. But it's a really stunning environment. And you just kind of see actually how wealthy the Duke of Westminster is. He has a huge area that's completely cordoned off, which you can't gain access to. There's a few footpaths that goes kind of directly through his estate, but for the most part, you can't enter the estate itself. What tends to happen in the United Kingdom, a lot of stately homes, sometimes the owners will have to open up to the general public just because they can't afford to run it, they can't afford to maintain it. The Duke of Westminster does not need to do that. He has a lot of money. So I think that's once a year maybe opens up and people can walk around the gardens. But you'll be able to see like the village Oldford next to it as well, which I think he owns the majority of that, and also the buildings. Is a really, really beautiful village. And then after that, I'm going to be heading on over to the Mostyn Hall, but I don't think I can really gain access to that just because it's directly in the Chester military barracks. So a lot of it's all cordoned off and fenced off, but we'll see if I can get any footage. And then after that, on to Beckford Hall as well. And again, it's the same situation. I'm not quite sure how close I can get to it, so we'll see. I'm just heading down now to the Duke of Westminster estate. I'm on it now, in fact. But I'm going to walk towards where the river is. There's a beautiful iron bridge there. Really, really spectacular location. But yeah, it just kind of gets me thinking in terms of these huge estates like Eaton Hall, and then further up to the north, you have Mostyn Hall and Beckford Hall, and, you know, potential links to Freemasonry. And obviously there'll be sacred knowledge in terms of positioning in the land, harnessing earth energies. And, you know, how much of these people who are building these huge estates, how much do they know? You know, it's a big question. And then also, are there rituals involved, occult rituals? I mean, who knows? Because obviously they're incredibly wealthy. Is that part of the reason why they're able to maintain and grow their wealth through, you know, manipulation of energy in some way? So anyway, that's what I've been thinking about. Crazy theories.
The Grosvenor family have called Eaton Hall on the banks of River Dee their ancestral home since the 15th century. The family fortune and wealth stems from luckily acquiring marshland in London in 1677. Marshland, which now currently stands as some of the most prestigious and expensive land in London, if not the world, these being Belgravia and Mayfair. The family's 1,000-year history goes up and beyond the times of William the Conqueror, with the family relocating from France to England. Currently, the Grosvenors are one of the wealthiest families in the United Kingdom, with an estimated £12 billion fortune, with commercial, residential developments, shopping centres and hotel portfolios all over the world. In 1874, the Grosvenors were granted the title Duke of Westminster. Ever since, they've been the long-time de facto custodians of the title. In 2016, the 6th Duke of Westminster, Major General Gerald Cavendish Grosvenor, died of a sudden heart attack at the age of 64. As was tradition with the family business and fortune, it was handed down to his 25-year-old son, now the 7th Duke of Westminster, and bypassing his 2 older sisters. The Grosvenor family have had very close ties with the royal household, with the current Duke being the godfather to both Prince William and Harry's sons. Prince William was also in attendance acting as an usher in 2024 when Hugh Grosvenor, now in his mid-30s, married Olivia Henson at Chester Cathedral. There are no overt stories I can find concerning occult ties or ritualistic behaviour, but the Grosvenors have been closely linked to the Freemasons for many generations. There is no information concerning the current Duke to Masonic activity, but overtly, this doesn't mean there are no connections to various secret societies or practices. Counter to this, there is an obelisk right in the middle of the driveway to Eaton Hall. This architectural structure harkens all the way back to ancient Egypt, with some of the key cities of Cabal power featuring specifically positioned obelisks, many directly stolen from Egypt. Personally, I'm still unsure of the mechanics of an obelisk. Some consider these pointed structures as maybe harnessing cosmic or earthly currents in some way, a phallic symbol, an earthly protruding spear denoting the power and wealth of the individual's estate. The Eaton Hall obelisk is made from red sandstone and features a copper cap, a highly conductive material, so thoughts can very easily drift towards some type of antenna. At the time of its construction, the first Duke of Westminster, Hugh Lupus Grosvenor, was a very prominent Grand Master Freemason of Cheshire, so it seems that during his tenure, the designs of the gardens and architecture very likely followed specific esoteric principles, utilising hidden knowledge from Masons and maybe other secretive organisations. The physical building of Eaton Hall has changed many times over the centuries and sits in an estate of around 10,900 acres, including formal gardens, parkland and woodland. The first property was built in the 17th century and replaced again in the 19th century with a building in the Gothic Revival style. This was then demolished in 1960 and a chateau-style building was erected a lot later in the 1980s. What I have noticed is that there is a huge bell tower as part of the family chapel in the estate, designed by Alfred Waterhouse in the Gothic Revival style. Strangely, Alfred's brothers went on to create PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, a huge multinational service network-based company in London. Chester Town Hall is also Gothic Revival, positioned opposite Chester Cathedral, and architecturally looks very similar to Eaton Hall Chapel. Initially, I thought they were the same architect, but the town hall was actually designed by William Henry Lynn. What is curious is that Marlborough College in Wiltshire, which I have driven past many times on the way to Avebury Stone Circle, is an incredibly prestigious boarding school with direct links to the Grosvenors and also the Royal Windsor family. It is of note because in the school grounds there is a sacred megalithic mound, similar to Silbury Hill down the road in Avebury. The megalithic mound is commonly known as Marlborough or Merlin's Mound. So the school in my view is situated in one of the most energetic places in the UK and has megalithic architecture in the grounds. The current Princess Kate Middleton attended there, along with Princess Eugene, and the current Duke's new wife Olivia Henson, who is also a student of Marlborough. It's also been recently released that allegedly young Prince George, Louis and Princess Charlotte are all expected to attend Marlborough College in the near future. which is a departure for the boys, especially from the usual Eton College in Slough next to Windsor Castle. I feel the Marlborough College aspect is an interesting correlation. Maybe there's nothing to it, but it is very noteworthy due to the earth energies, and let's not forget the huge military presence that resides in Wiltshire. This is pure speculation, but in certain elite circles, although on the face of it friendships, connections or marriages could appear organic, but maybe there is more curation and planning of certain ruling bloodlines. Princess Kate Middleton, when leaving the hospital with newly born Prince Louis, was wearing the same outfit as Mia Farrow in Rosemary's Baby, a film about the birth of the Antichrist. There were also strange death rumours involving Kate's sister's former boyfriend, further rumours of affairs linked to the death, and then a strange and sudden cancer diagnosis, along with the disappearance of Kate from the public sphere for a time, and then AI released imagery to prove she was still around. All very peculiar. There are huge questions, not here and not now in this video, about how deep the rabbit hole goes, with people in positions of power and literally who and what they really are, and the control structure around them. Of course, all these individuals could be unwitting victims stuck in a very dark system themselves. It was only upon researching a bit deeper into the initial Mostyn Hall and then the subsequent surrounding developing military installation and the later activities occurring at this military installation has really added fuel to the fire of my inner conspiracy mind. Overall, Mostyn Hall was built around 1789 for Richard Massey. The large Georgian hall replaced an existing Elizabethan structure that had stood there since the 16th century. After that, the hall was bought and sold numerous times, until the War Office acquired and took over not only the hall, but also further adjacent houses in the village of Mostyn around 1937 to 1938. Mostyn Hall served as a military hospital, and the wider site, known as the Dale, became the home to the Cheshire Regiment from their original home at Chester Castle. Its use then spanned into World War II and was classed at the time as a machine gun training centre. This is where things get a little weird for me. In 1956 and 1987, it was partly used as a secure mental asylum, until these sections were eventually returned back to military use. Now apparently, Dale Barracks is predominantly used by the Experimentation Battalion. Very strange indeed. Something is definitely afoot. Similar to other military installations, there's always a question and many speculations about literally how deep these facilities of Chesterdale Barracks go, and are there deeper structures underground, particularly if the operational functions of the current base are so experimental. This is what I found on the Army's MOD website. 2 Yorks is the Army's Experimentation Battalion. Their role is to test the latest technology on offer to the Army. 2 R Yorks are the architects of how the British Army will fight and win in the future. From new weapons and sights to drones and remote platoon vehicles, the battalion is at the cutting edge of how human soldiers and machines will integrate on the battlefield in the future. From my point of view, that sounds very transhumanist, integrating machines with soldiers. Further in town, not far away from the Dale Barracks, again on the banks of the River Dee, is the former headquarters to the Bank of Scotland, called Churchill House. The reason for its name was because prior to this it was the headquarters to the Western Command, which interestingly, during World War II, was visited by Winston Churchill, General Charles de Gaulle and General Dwight D. Eisenhower, who later obviously became President Eisenhower. and went on to warn the globe of the military-industrial complex. Plus, this president is steeped in conspiracy folklore surrounding agreements between governments and ETs and potential battles with deep state factions. His great-granddaughter, Laura Eisenhower, is very active on the conference circuit, podcasts, and social media, and is very open to these very deep cosmic aspects of his presidency. Underneath Churchill House, there is a tunnel and underground facility that has been discovered by various urban explorers. So is there a wider network of tunnels and facilities underneath Chester? And if any of these facilities actually connect up? Again, this is wild speculation, but the fact that the barracks had a mental asylum attached, and it's really unclear if this was for military or civilian purposes. There is hardly any information written about this place or its function. Plus, its existence was during the MK Ultra era. Covert mind control programs like this were going on all over the world right when this mental asylum was operating. And now, experimental warfare? I've genuinely been very surprised on the strangeness of the base's activity, coupled with the energetic component of the Aerfen alignment. Have the experiments been a lot deeper than we can ever imagine, with harnessing the Earth-based energies and natural portals for military experimentation, or consciousness suppression of the Earth's grid to suppress humanity's spiritual shifts? Again, a lot of speculation, but there is the possibility. Chester is one of the oldest documented Masonic lodges in England, with the 17th and 18th centuries witnessing significant Masonic activity in and around Chester. It seems if you were a relatively wealthy family or had connections to the officer class in the military, there is a very strong, distinct possibility of links to the Masons and other secret societies. The Grosvenor family have provable long-standing membership and connections with the Freemasons, and many held high positions within various Masonic orders. In fact, they have a lodge named after them, Grosvenor Lodge number 1257, consecrated 24th of April 1869. This lodge had a real particular prominence in London's Westminster. Because of Chester's significance as a commercial and administrative centre, coupled with the military installations in Chester Castle and its close proximity to the Aerfen line and later Dale Barracks, and not forgetting the magistrates' courts, all of these infrastructural points really do guarantee Masonic activity and influence. My argument is that ironically it was the Romans and later Roman Catholic Church that were tasked with suppressing and destroying ancient knowledge and history. It's an oppressive system which arguably we still live under to this day. This sacred ancient knowledge which demystifies our constructed reality, earth energies and its harnessing through architecture, materials and placement now seems to be restricted to the privileged class via secret societies and oaths. We can only speculate, but it seems that maybe fragments of this ancient knowledge from ancient civilizations and mystery schools is known to these higher Masonic circles, which has resultantly influenced the construction of various mansions, military installations, churches and cathedrals in Chester, but also around the Western world. Particularly the Dale Barracks and the information surrounding the existing mysterious experimentation battalion and larger, deeper underground World War II facilities close to the River Dee. How much of these energies are being harnessed in a ritualistic sense, but also in order to gain power and control over the wider population. Again, a lot of speculation, but when you lay out all the aspects to this particular quest, it starts to show some very compelling connections. At the surface level, we can claim some of these well-connected families have links to secret societies such as Freemasons, which is overtly visible, even though most of the knowledge is actually hidden. But again, speculating, how deep does this go? It appears to me that these various secretive orders draw strength and power from a pantheon of gods. Evidence from various mind control victims and SRA experiences seems to show that there isn't one overarching deity they worship or try to gain favour from. From various conspiracy occult researchers, there's a lot of information concerning Mithras and Saturnian ritual cults. Both, particularly Mithras, was very popular in ancient Rome. Mithraic worship appears strong amongst male, wealthy, powerful individuals. As a modern day example, billionaire, former New York mayor and financier Michael Bloomberg decided to build his European headquarters in the 2000s on top of a Roman temple of Mithras in the city of London. Bloomberg spent an estimated $1 billion fusing the ancient Mithraic temple into the fabric of his headquarters. Mithras religion was a secretive mystery cult and exclusively for men, and involved initiation rites, practices and rituals. Some make the connection between this dominant focus on men and the discounting of women altogether. If you look at the wives of George Bush Sr., Bloomberg, the current French President Macron and even Obama, you may start to see a pattern. I know this is highly controversial. There is no hate on my side about these types of relationships. I'm merely pointing out the veil of secrecy surrounding this relationship dynamic amongst certain powerful men. And maybe how this is shaped by their religious worldview. It appears all roads indeed do lead to Rome in some very strange ways. Similar to Chester Cathedral, St Oswald's Backford is medieval in its style and construction and from the 13th century. The site of worship did have previous powerful connections with a Benedictine monastery that was very dominant in and around Cheshire at the time. Again, because of the construction period, there are links to Templar knowledge and understanding. The church's name is dedicated to St Oswald, a 7th century Anglo-Saxon king whose body parts were weirdly distributed across Britain as sacred objects. It's probably highly likely that this church originally held all or maybe some of these bodily relics. Another strange historical event was the marrying of a 3-year-old boy to a woman in 1538. The child was lured into the church by his uncle with an apple, who held him there until he was forcibly married. It was theorised by some Victorian scholars that this church sat on the Backford Gap, a geological feature and ancient waterway that connected the River Dee to the River Mersey in Liverpool. Water again always plays a very powerful role in earth energies and sacred sites in general, although modern day scholars now dispute the idea of the Backford Gap. Backford Hall is now very much closed off to the public, so it's hard to see even from surrounding public roads or footpaths. The current Victorian Manor House, Backford Hall, was designed and built between 1848 and 1863. The current building is the final third iteration of this building from its original inception. The original owner, Lieutenant Colonel Edward Holt Glegg of the Rifle Brigade, and the wider Glegg family have incredibly old and traditional Cheshire roots, harking way back into the Anglo-Saxon period. The hall has had various tenants since 1928, from a boys' school, a Salvatorian religious order, and then offices that were part of Chester City Council. Since 2012, it was finally divided and sold into various residential flats. There are numerous stories of ghostly apparitions involving a servant girl who came to an unfortunate grisly death and who is still encountered to this day. It's reported that the Salvatorian religious order even tried to exorcise the spirit from the building, but unfortunately failed to do so. This quest exploration of my place of birth has really expanded way more than I initially thought. There was so much more I could draw into this story. It has without doubt expanded my perceptions of where I was born, a place when I was 19 I couldn't wait to leave. The activity at Dale Barracks and the traceable Masonic activity has taken me by surprise. Along with Ralph Ellis and Chester's connections with biblical messianic figures are admittedly out there, but nonetheless should be given serious consideration. This quest really highlights how maybe different gods and goddesses, whether they are actually defined entities or energies or merely constructs of the human collective subconscious, can flow through time and be known under many different names. As we have seen, maybe with Aerfen, Diva, Minerva, Morrigan, Morgan Le Fay, and Mother Mary. The same is true with potential historical figures when referencing ideas of Jesus, Yeshua, or even King Arthur. An interesting side note is the recent explorations of my subconscious via QHHT regression methods. During one session, I had the mental recall of being a Roman soldier or an imperial soldier of some description located in a hot and dusty desert fortress. The way I interpreted these visions was what it seemed to be showing me was an aspect of masculinity, comradeship, and brothers in arms. Questions arise when people research and explore these historical topics and find a lot of resonance and interest. Could this be because they were there in a different human form during these times? They experienced the story firsthand, so effectively you are remembering what you've already experienced. I have no formal education in history, and my knowledge of mainstream-led historical accounts is at best fractured and confused. So this is a very ramshackle view of my experiences of Chester these last couple of years and the information I've come across over recent times. So as with all narratives and people, always question what's being put before you. That said, personally, I found this quest very compelling.
So, what do you think? In conclusion, summary, I think, I think there's quite a lot to this alignment. At the moment, I'm calling it the Minerva line. The name might change depending on what title I give the video. But yeah, maybe at some point when I got more time, it'd be quite good to get my dowsing rods out and then try and actually find some physical ley lines or energy lines or whatever is connected to the energy that I'm feeling. I just have a hunch. There's just so many of these alignments in terms of all these stately homes and churches and the sacred site of the Minerva goddess. I don't know, I just get the sense there's something to it. I could be completely wrong. But I hope you've enjoyed this video. I'm quite tired now, so I'm lying down and relaxing. I thought I'd record this, chilling. And hopefully I'm going to be doing a lot more of these, and I will see you again soon. But I hope you enjoyed this journey, and please do subscribe. It will make me very happy. Okay, bye.